I'm gonna make him an offer again.
¿Por qué? Este tío es un campeón.
¿Por qué? Porque puedo.
You speaking about that brought three things to mind, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna tell you them really quickly just so I don't forget. Mm-hmm. Because when I go on a rant, like I forget things. Right. So I'm gonna tell you these three things to you. Okay. So once I talk about one, we can go on to the other, right?
Hopefully I don't forget.
You don't forget either, right? Uh-huh. So the first one is what you spoke about. If you do something good, you get something good, right? I'll speak about that. The other one is the paradox that people say about God being all good, God being all powerful, and the devil existing, mm-hmm. right? And then this one that I want to speak about right now is so you mentioned the Lord and the Lord, right? I saw it. There's a Lord that's fully capitalized, and there's a Lord that's pure lowercase, and he gave the explanation behind that, right?
Psalm 110, verse 1, for reference.
Say that one more time.
Psalm 110, verse 1. That's just an example where mm-hmm. in the same verse, you can see both Lords.
You can see that they're not referring to the same person. So now, let me tell you something that a lot of people also talk about, right? And they say that the Bible mm-hmm. is a fabrication mm-hmm. to make people obey, mm-hmm. right? If we look back of, specifically during the era of the creation of the Bible, the time of that these great figures like David were alive in this world, mm-hmm. and we have historical backings to prove these people were real people, right? But if we look back at their world, there was a king, a monarch, right? Mm-hmm. One person who was in charge of everyone. And we do know how it's always hard for the few to control the individuals, right?
Yeah.
And something that is said is the Bible and these stories, just how we see them mm-hmm. as stories for us to learn and do good in the world.
Yeah.
Back then, these were stories of, you gotta follow my rules mm-hmm. or else watch out. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's heavily talked about, saying that these Bibles were created by the leaders of the time. This Bible was created by the leaders of the time.
Yeah.
By the king of the time. Mm-hmm. So he could have people who, also what we talked about earlier, right? Back then it was king and religion together, right?
Yeah.
So we have this book or this religion for other people to follow, mm-hmm. for them to be, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but for them to be sheep.
Yeah, just to
obey. And just obey.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I mean, so you're saying it's the kings and the religious people that are making all this up. So then why would they
not making it up in terms of saying that God's not real or anything like that, but more of they created this, mm-hmm. right? And enforced this in order to keep kind of like an iron hold on their people, mm-hmm. and just make their people try to do good and do better, so it's easier for them,
Yeah.
And if they don't do good and they do commit these, these sins, it was.
I'll be afraid because God's gonna punish.
Yeah, it was easy for them to mm-hmm. be like, you're wrong, and if you're not following us, who are following God, mm-hmm. then you're wrong, and off with your head, you know.
Okay, so and that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But then my response to that would be, then why would those people who are in charge, why would they leave so many books who blame the kings and the priests?
Okay.
Why would you, if you make, if you're trying to make yourself look good, you're not going to leave the things that talk negatively about you, right? And mm-hmm. the Bible, when you read it, it's funny because I was reading that today before I came here. It puts all the blame on the kings and on the religious people because they were in charge of the law and they were supposed to teach the people, and God specifically blames them. So,
I think it also comes down to, the kings and the religious figures at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, through history, each king thinks they're the best king.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, if you're the current king and the current religious, I'm just gonna say Pope for easier, even though they had their own names back then.
Yeah.
But if you have the king and the Pope here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to convince your people
Mm-hmm.
that you guys are the best king and the best Pope they've ever had,
Yeah.
I feel like they would be open to the slander of the previous generations of kings and popes,
Yeah.
saying, look at how they did wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and look at all these things that they did wrong. The kings behind me, the popes behind, or the, you know, right, the kings behind me were wrong,
Yeah.
and this is what happened to them, and I'm enforcing you guys to do good so you guys could be better,
Mm-hmm.
or else you'll meet the same fate as the old king, making them higher. You know what I mean?
No, yeah.
I feel like that's could be a reason for it.
Yeah, I could see because if you study the Bible, the lineage, you know, like all the kings and all the nations that they meet, they're all real. You know, like all for example, they talk about Babylon was real.
Yeah.
They talk about Medo-Persia was real. They talk about Greece was real.
Yeah.
They talked about the Romans were real. It talks about bad kings, but also talks about good kings, like some of the good things they did and stuff. But at some point, the lineage of the kings kind of ends. So when Israel, the people of God, they disobey so much, God's like, I'm cutting you guys off, and I'm gonna let other kingdoms rule over you because that's what you want. So that's what you're gonna get. So to me, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. Like, at some point, you know, the lines of kings ends, and especially, you know, we talked about how the Old Testament is technically the Bible of the Jews, right? Like, you look at their Bible and you look at our Bible, our Old Testament is the same.
Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Old Testament is a lot of, I guess, the Jewish people just trying to find their place in the world, and when they're good, you know, they have a leader to show them the right way. But when they do bad, they are kind of like screwed, right, in the Old Testament.
So God punishes them. So they've always been trying to live in the promised land God promised them. But He said, I will keep my end of the covenant if you guys do well. Like, I'll keep you here. If you guys rebel against me, I'll punish you. They continue to do so bad that eventually, you know, God drives them away and stuff. But so the point I would say, you know, when you're talking about how like, oh, these are just stories, you know, so the Old Testament is like the Jews' Bible, right? But if you, for example, and the New Testament is where we start with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
If you see what the Jews have to say about Jesus, they hate Jesus, or they deny him. They say he was like a false prophet. He's burning in hell right now. And I've read some other teachings. That's what they teach about Jesus. But when you study the Old Testament, again, this book that belongs to the Jews, when you actually study it, it all points to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense at all. Like you were talking about it, you know.
Yeah, they're always talking about the great one coming.
And again, they hate Jesus, but it's pointing to him. So, like, you know, it's contradictory. Like, how? So if somebody says, "Oh, men came up with this book," and specifically the Jews came up with this book, so if they came up with this book, and it's all about this guy called Jesus, like, why do they deny him? Like, it's pointing to this guy. So again, if you carefully study it, you know, you carefully study the Bible, it points to Jesus. I don't know if you've heard about like when Abraham is supposed to sacrifice his son Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stuff where again Abraham, the father, has to sacrifice his son Isaac, and he has to go sacrifice him on a hill. And Abraham, the father, makes his own son carry the wood for his own sacrifice. So little details like that. God, the Father, sacrificed his own son Jesus on a hill called Calvary.
Right. And
he made his own son carry the wood, the cross, for the sacrifice. So you see that parallel? That's the story from the Jews. How is it that the Jews that don't believe in Jesus, their Bible is about Jesus?